The woman who made a king abdicate. Edward was the eldest son and heir of King George V. He was thus next in line to the throne of the United Kingdom. He became King Edward VIII in 1936. Edward abdicated the throne over his mistress Wallis Simpson. He became a Duke of Windsor so that he could marry Wallis. 1. Wallis lived on the fringes of high society. Wallis Simpson was born Bessie Wallis Warfield in 1896. Her father died when she was just a baby. Her mother lost all her investments in 1929. Wallis married Earl Winfield Spencer when she was 20. Spencer was alleged to be abusive and an alcoholic. By the time of their divorce, Wallis had already had an affair. Her second marriage was to Ernest Aldrich Simpson. He was a wealthy Anglo-American shipping executive. He introduced Wallis Simpson to British society. The marriage ended in divorce in 1937. 2. She first met the Prince of Wales through his mistress. New to British society, Wallis relied on a network of American expats. She became friends with Thelma, Lady Furness. Furness happened to be the current mistress of Prince Edward. 3. Edward was more interested in Wallis than his royal duties. Wallis and Edward met in 1931 through Lady Furness. They became lovers only 3 years later. Edward took Wallis on multiple vacations and flirted with her. It was interfering with his princely duties. 4. Wallis was dominating Edward. Those who knew Wallis said she possessed a strong personality. Edward followed her around like a dog. People assumed that dominance was what he liked best about her. 5. Her love affair with Edward VIII provoked an abdication crisis. King Edward didn't want to rule without Wallis by his side, but the British people would never accept her as their queen. She was a divorcee and still legally married to Ernest Simpson. Wallis and Ernest would not divorce until 1937. Some also believed that she had links to Germany's Nazi regime. She was even rumored to have had an affair with Joachim von Ribbentrop. For Edward, it was a choice between love and duty. On December 11, 1936, King Edward VIII announced his abdication. His younger brother succeeded him as King George VI. 6. Wallis and Edward were virtually exiled after his abdication. Edward was exiled from Britain and went to France. He and Wallis married a month after her divorce in 1937. They received the titles of Duke and Duchess of Windsor. In 1940, Edward was appointed governor of the Bahamas. They returned to France after the war and lived there. 7. Wallis and Edward didn't have their happily ever after. Wallis remained deferential to Edward in public, but once the doors were closed, she was cruel to him. He often asked her,
"Am I going to go to bed in tears again tonight?"
She spent all her time with effeminate young men. Wallis would stay in nightclubs until dawn. She'd send the Duke home early, saying,
"Buzz off, mosquito."
The Duke and Duchess drank a lot in their later lives. 8. Wallis was the first woman to become Time's Person of the Year. In 1936, Time named her Man of the Year. The annual feature is now known as Person of the Year. The choice of Wallis Simpson changed the name of the feature